So welcome back, everybody. We are drawing Elon Musk today in a tuxedo. This is a great three-quarter view head, and the lighting isn't too bad. Notice that we can read the shadow break along this side of the face, along this side of the nose. So it's got a lot of good visual information. When you're looking for your own photographs to draw, you want to be looking for photographs like this that show that have a fairly strong single light source. A lot of professional photographers use what's called a fill flash to fill in the shadows, and that makes the drawings less valuable to us as artists. Because it kind of flattens them out. So because this head is almost facing us, I'm going to think of the cranium as being almost a circle. Here's the side of the face, and I'm looking for where the jaw intersects the ear hole, and it's way back here. So my initial conception of this, remember the cranium comes down as far as the bottom of the nose. His hair has a lot of volume, so we have to disregard that height up there. So here's this general shape of the cranium, and here's the general shape of the face. Extending down from the cranium, and the ear hole is way back towards the very back of the cranium. So that's how I'm thinking of the anatomical volume underneath this head. The next thing I'm going to be looking for is the angle of the eyes. This becomes a perspective problem. Notice that if we go through the eyes and we go through the corners of the mouth, we have just a little bit of convergence here. And I'm going to go even across the hairline. So these lines all converge just a little. Let me explain something important. Does this look like a posed photograph in an artist's studio? What do you think? Anybody have a theory? Where does it look like it was taken? Okay, I'm going to guess it was taken like at a public event, okay, like a black tie dinner. And the photographer was probably pretty far away and probably using a zoom lens. And the further you get from the subject, the less those red lines are going to converge. So the fact that these red lines are virtually parallel to each other really gives us information that the photographer was really far away. If you were sitting or photographing Elon closer up, you'd have a more pronounced kind of convergence there. So we're going to notice that the eye line is centered on the overall head, right? So this distance is exactly the same as this distance. Everyone agree with that? And we want to be really careful about that because Elon is known for his brains, and if we made the rookie mistake of putting the eyes too high, we would be minimizing the size of his cranium, which would be not a good idea for somebody of his intelligence. It's never a good idea, but okay. So that's the eye line centered here. Now we're going to double check. Remember, we look for the nose to be centered between the brows and the bottom of the chin. I'm talking about the bottom of the nose. And you can measure this yourself, but I would say that's very close to being in the exact middle. He does have a slightly strong chin, so might be that is just a little tiny bit above center. I'm going to put it right about there. And then we're looking for the mouth to be a third of the way down between the bottom of the nose and the bottom of the chin, which it actually is. So that gives us our main breaks for the features. Hello? Okay, so I sort of forgot to make the brow line, and as a result my nose is probably a little too low. I'm having a bit of an off day here. Remember, I was measuring from the brow to the bottom of the nose, the same as nose to bottom of the chin, and I was measuring from my eye line, so it's not going to make a major difference, but I apologize for that. So what does that change? That means the nose is just a little higher than we marked it, and the mouth is also just a little higher. Okay. So we're going to take one really significant measurement, which is I'm going to go from the center of the bridge of the nose and measure off to the right, and I want to have a sense of the ratio between this interval here and this interval here, which is from the center of the nose all the way to the back of the cranium. So what I'm going to do is measure this interval and then count how many of those could fit to the left of it. So there's 1 and 2, 3, and 4. So this bridge of the nose is about 4/5 of the way across. So this interval here is about 1/4 the size of this interval here. As some of you know, I call that fractional thinking. It's really, really useful to do that whenever you come to a place in the drawing where you're liable to screw up, which is in a 3/4 view. That's always the bridge of the nose. What people do when they see a 3/4 view, the bridge of the nose goes way over to one side, and beginner artists always just pull it towards the middle. And what they're doing is they're sort of drawing an average between what they're seeing and what they know as the reference position from the front. So don't fall into that trap. Take a few measurements. Make sure this is in the right place. Okay, the next thing I'm going to be looking for is this angle. And I'm going to reference it to a vertical. So I'm looking for the space between this vertical and this angle, and I'm going to say it's about 15 degrees. That's an important angle to measure, again, because when you draw noses, you tend to draw them the way you think of them, which is projecting out a lot more than that. So it's really useful to take that measurement And then we're going to double back like that. And if I go from the other side of the bridge of the nose this way with the same amount of slope, that's going to help me find the back of the nose. Back of the ala is back here. And I'm just going to put in a very non-specific little dark to locate where the nostril is. Okay, and I'm also going to I'm going to put in a little non-specific dark for the eyebrows. And, well, first I'm going to put in a little dark for this is that surface I've talked about that beginners always overlook, the little space between the bridge of the nose and the eye socket on the side closer to us. So that puts the dark for this eyebrow over here. We're not going to get into specific shapes on the eyes yet, but I am going to put in a very vague little dark for the shadow under the eyelid, and then a non-specific dark for the iris here. And please do what I'm doing. Don't do hard outlines yet, because we're not sure about this. I don't like to do any hard outlines on a portrait until I've achieved a likeness. So we're doing the same thing on this side. And I'm going to do a little dark on the side of the nose. And you see how the more darks we put in, the more our brains start to read this as three-dimensional form, which is the goal. It doesn't look pretty yet, but we're trying to get ourselves to the point of a likeness without having made any definite decisions about anything. So the philtrum, his philtrum slopes out quite a bit. You see that? It's not quite as, it's a little steeper than the nose, but it's probably a good 5 degrees slope. And it starts sort of where this nostril ends. So we're going to indicate the philtrum. That helps us locate the center of the lips right under the philtrum. And his Cupid's bow center is right there. And we're going to take a close look at this, because this is really a great example of what we deal with in a 3/4 view. And when you're drawing from your own photo references, I really encourage you to zoom in like this, because it's so much easier to understand these proportions if you're close up. So here's the center of the mouth, here's the corner of the mouth on this side, and here's the corner of the mouth on this side. And our ratio here is almost 2 to 1. You see that? So the center of the mouth is almost 2/3 of the way across. So what that means is this wing of the mouth, which we're going to draw now on this side, is about half the size of this wing of the mouth. And what you're going to want to do is make them too much the same size, because you want your mouth to be symmetrical, again, because you're thinking of the mouth from the reference position from the front. So I did kind of get specific right there. That'll force me to kind of work around that. Okay. But it does feel to me like my mouth's is it a little wide? Let's see. So what I'm going to do is check this angle. And yeah, I think it's not too bad. Let's see if we can work with that. He does have a kind of a long philtrum. And one problem is I haven't really given him his throat yet. His throat comes down under his chin, and that gives him a little more mass down below. We'll see. Okay, I'm going to put in some vague shadow forms for the side of the face and the chin. And as I keep telling you, I want you to think of this as a sculptural process. Like we are working with, as if we're working with clay here, and we are starting with a non-specific lump of clay and sort of banging it into shape. Okay, as I think about this collar, what I'm thinking about is the angle, which is about 45 degrees, and the point at which it terminates is about equal to the upper part of the philtrum. So most of you, if you don't measure, you're going to make the collar way too low, because people think collars have to be under heads. And you'll notice this collar comes up way high. And comes up behind the ear. The ear is level, again, a little below the nose and a little above the eyes. So he's got a pretty large ear. This is another clue that the photograph was taken from far away, because if it was taken from closer, the ear would be relatively small compared to the face. But you can see this ear is pretty huge. And he's has such stature as a celebrity that it's not unlikely that this could have been taken in a very large room with a very, very long zoom lens. Okay, we're going to block in the hair because he looks pretty much unlike Elon if he's bald. And blocking in, remember, is thinking of compound curves in terms of straight lines. So we're gonna, I'm gonna give you a reference here for what we're gonna try to draw. And to get the height of it right, we might do one bit of fractional thinking here, because if we know the distance from the eyebrow to the hairline, which is right about here, right? So this is what we know, and what we don't know is this. This is more than half of that distance. So this distance, the height of the hair is going to be about to here. Most of you are going to want to make the hair too small. It has admirable volume. So just having measured one thing is very helpful for just blocking in the rest of the head. And since his hair is dark, I'm going to do a first shading up here. Remember to do it the other direction if you're right-handed. I'm just doing my lefty shading here. And because the ear is in shadow, I'm going to let this dark go right over the ear. So at this point, my drawing has like 0 pretty details. If you like to draw pretty details, you're not going to feel very rewarded yet. But what it does have is a sense of the volume of the head, the turn of the head, and even the direction of the gaze, right? We can tell where he's looking, and I can frankly tell it doesn't look a whole lot like him yet. And I'm looking back and forth, and I'm looking for reasons why it may not look like him. And I'm feeling, first of all, there might be just a little more space between his eyes. So look how I'm gonna move this dark over a little to the left. And what I want you to understand is that what I just did there is like so much easier than redrawing the whole eye if I had drawn it in the slightly wrong position. I'm going to bring the tip of the nose down a little, but again, all I'm moving around are these little patches of shadow. I'm not moving around beautifully drawn, detailed features. I'm going to create a little shadow shape for his upper lip. And he's got a little bit of an overbite, so I'm going to indicate where his bottom lip ends. You see how his upper lip extends way past the bottom lip, so just by indicating that and throwing this little, gives his mouth a little more of that characteristic look. And what you want to do at this stage is keep adding little patches of shadow. Stay non-specific, but we're not gonna drill down to the details until this messy, sketchy, till this pattern of light and dark starts to look like him. And the big idea here is that if you draw all the features correctly, you can create the illusion that you have a likeness when in fact there's always going to be something wrong. Because we do recognize people 2 ways. One way is by the arrangement of the features, the relationship of the features to each other, and the other way is by the individual features themselves. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a likeness only exclusively with the relations of the features to each other. You get that? So we're by staying so non-specific with the individual features, if we can get a likeness without any such specificity, then we are going to then we'll feel confident that it's time to draw the details of the features. And we can feel confident that they're in the right place. A lot of these steps are skipped over by if you look at a lot of drawing tutorials on YouTube, they skip over these steps, and you'll notice that the artists who create these tutorials never seem to make any mistakes. Like, they never place a feature in the wrong spot. And I don't mean to be cynical, but I mean, I know there are people out there that draw a lot better than I do, but I also know that it's really easy. It would be very easy for me to create an overlay of this photograph that was like 75% transparent that I could see when I was drawing the face and you would not be able to see. And using that overlay, I would get the position of the features right every time. Obviously, I'm not doing anything like that because I don't think that's not what drawing is to me. But that's why you see me making errors and moving stuff around. And I want you to learn to move stuff around and make mistakes too. Okay, so we're at the point in the drawing now where we're going to zoom in, and however well you did with the likeness, we're kind of going to commit to it now, and we're going to start with looking at some of these features close up. So this eye shape, remember how we blocked in the hair? We could think about the eye also in terms of a series of straight lines. So from this inside corner, we're going to go up pretty steep to start. And then we're going to, don't draw it too dark yet because we're going to turn this into a curve in a second. You can see how far off this is from being like the symmetrical little football or almond that most people think eyes look like. So now I'm going to erase the lines and look at what's actually happening here. So we've got a typical little shadow edge under the eyelid, actually casts a shadow onto the eyeball. Through here, we've got a eyelid that's pretty wide in the middle, and then it tapers. It gets thinner and thinner as it goes towards the outside. And here's the tricky part. So here's the white of the eye is here, and the white of the eye, and then here's this illuminated surface of the lower lid. And they notice that they are both light and they kind of merge together. So I'm going to leave this as a very faint broken line, and then what I'm going to focus on is shading along the lower lash line to bring out that lower eyelid. The important thing to do is most beginners just draw a dark line along this edge, and you can see that there is no dark line there. And it's very bad to draw one because it's basically a plane change between two surfaces that are both in full light. And to draw the iris, we are looking as usual for the negative spaces around it. So there's this very tiny little shark tooth form on the left and a much bigger one on the right. I'm talking about this negative space here. And notice that the pupil is tucked almost under the eyelid. A lot of people just, without thinking, put it in the center of the eye. And notice the iris is a little darker on this side and a little lighter on the other. and that's because the iris is an inverted cone. So the shadow side of the head is going to be the lighter side of the iris. And I can get a little more specific with the height of the eyebrow here and the shape of the eye socket shadow here and here. And we're going to move on to the nose. So he's got just a slightly beakish nose, which we're going to convey mainly with this shadow edge. You see how this shadow edge has a strong convex curve? And I'm mapping it very, very faintly, just finding this outline. Most beginners don't realize that finding these outlines correctly is just as important as finding the outlines of the forms. The outlines of the shadows are often just as descriptive of form as the outlines of the forms themselves. So that's a pretty important one. And then I'm going to darken through the core of this shadow as if I was shading a cylinder. This other side, by contrast, this is, again, the light form of the bridge of the nose overlapping the fully illuminated cheek. So this is another outline that we want to keep very, very faint. And you can control that with your eraser. A lot of artists will actually use a broken line for something like this. You see how I'm not quite closing that off? Just to give us a sense that the light is really striking these forms. Whenever you put a dark outline between two illuminated forms, makes your drawing look clumsier. And we're going to do a little form shading around the back of this ala. And just a little bit at this intersection between the main part of the nose and the ala there. And now I'm ready to be more definite about this nostril form. It starts off high, and then it plunges way down towards the tip of the nose with the shadow accent visible only at the top, like that. And this photograph has a strong cast shadow under the nose that is darker than the shadow on the nose. This has a lot of reflected light bouncing up into the ala, but there's no reflected light underneath. So we want to go a step darker down here than we went up here. So we're really focusing on these 3/4 view heads, and one thing to be aware of that I'm going to keep talking about is you're going to want to make the eyes the same size when in fact this eye is significantly narrower left to right than this one. You see that? And that's because this one is turning away from us and this one is facing us. So that comes back to foreshortening, which we've talked a lot about. So just be aware of that tendency. We're going to start that eye in a moment, but just be aware of it and try not to make it too big. Another common trouble area is a lot of you are going to have a hard time believing that if this is the bridge of the nose, this eye starts right inside it. You're going to want to leave more space there, again, because your brains want to impose symmetry on this. Like, so you see all this space here, you want to put the same amount of space on the other side, but obviously it's much less space on this side. So we're going to start the eye right here. Then I'm going to block it in like I did the other one. And notice the shape is really nothing like the shape on the other side. And that's because the angle is so different and because his eyes aren't exactly symmetrical. A lot of my favorite Northern Renaissance artists used to really play up the asymmetry between their subjects' eyes, which I kind of enjoyed. The beginner will always play up the similarities and make the eyes too much the same. So here's the iris. I'm looking for those shark tooth shapes around it. And there's the pupil again, almost disappearing under the lid. And a little darker on the right, except for where the highlight is. And the eyelid on this side is a more consistent width, going all the way across and around. And his eyebrows, I'm noticing, are really wide. They're almost as wide as his eyes. So we don't want to minimize that. Now I'm seeing that I probably cut in a little too much here. His side of his face is pretty flat. And now we are ready for his, well, I guess I should. So I usually leave the halftones for the end of the drawing. Remember, halftones are areas of dark that aren't shadows, but they're just a little darker than the lights around them. But these halftones around this eye are very valuable for defining the form of the eye socket. So just use your lightest touch to develop some of these plane changes around the eye. And also this plane change, this subtle kind of fold right along here, and right a little halftone defining under the cheek on this side. So now we have come to probably the most characteristic part of his face, his mouth. There's something unusual here with this overbite. Frankly, it looked awful when I first blocked it in, but now I'm feeling like it's pretty close. I'm just gonna, as I darken this, I'm gonna come up a little higher here and create just a little elevation, so that allows me to kind of swoop downhill a little more towards that outside corner. A really subtle change, but notice I didn't have to erase anything because my first indication of that form was faint enough that now that I'm pressing harder, my final lines aren't really, my initial lines aren't really competing with my final ones. And here's that other corner of the mouth. And he does have very red lips. Usually we want to downplay the influence of local color in our drawings. His lips are so red that it's hard to see where they're in shadow and where they're not. And they are pretty well defined. So I'm going to introduce some of that color into my drawing by shading the lips a little darker than I normally would, even where they're in the light. This halftone at the corner of his mouth is very significant for expression. And he's got these little, okay, so here's where things get very unusual, I would say. His lips have a sense that they're being pursed. You know what that means? Like, I think you call it, do you call it mewing, I think? Is he mewing? Would anyone say he's mewing? No one answers my questions in this class. I'm not sure I'm using the word correctly. He's not? Okay. Thank you, Josie. So, slightly pursed lip, and it's, see this halftone break right along here? And it sort of transitions to this. He doesn't have the shadow right under his lip. The shadow is like way down here. Definitely some weird things going on with this form. Like this plane change is not typically, doesn't typically follow this trajectory. Okay, and I guess while we're here, we're gonna give him his little this little bit of the mustache that he seems to be growing. I think he usually has that, doesn't he? I don't. Keeps it short. Okay. And then we're going to take another look at the chin line. So very important here. It's another thing my students have trouble with is, so here's the line of this face transitions right into the line of the throat. There is not a hard overlap here for the chin. What we have instead is a plane change indicated by the beginning of a shadow. You see that? So I'm going to draw it that way. I'm going to indicate this plane change, but I'm not connecting it to this contour. This is the contour. This plane change happens inside it. going to liven up our shading with a little bit of more stubble. And with apologies to Elon, we gotta look for some of these signs of middle age, like this. See this shadow below the corner of his mouth and a little bit beyond it. There's this shadow that sort of almost connects with the chin shadow. And then there's this light under it. And this is the beginning of what's called a jowl. This sort of light form here. And you'll remember we simplified this into a very straight line earlier on, but now we're going to give it a little curve. It's actually the flesh of the jowl is actually spilling slightly over the collar of the tuxedo. I hope he doesn't watch this video because probably not going to like the way I'm talking about him, but this contour shows a little bit of the fullness of the flesh through here. And we get up to the back of the neck, which is that's almost almost a 45-degree angle there. It's like very sloping forward a lot. And this little shadow under the ear. Make sure you make that ear big enough and tall enough. I think mine even needs to go a little higher. So you'll notice in my drawing looks an awful lot more like Elon now that I've made the features specific. But if I had started with that, I would have done a poor job, I guarantee, of getting them in the correct relation to each other. And that's the big idea from today is if you can challenge yourself to get some kind of likeness before you've drawn any of the features in detail, you're going to have confidence that the features are where they belong. And there's nothing more frustrating, I'm sure you've all had this experience, of drawing two eyes perfectly and then realizing that they're like a little too close together. Or drawing a mouth perfectly and realizing that it's a little too close to the chin. Because then you have to erase all the work that you gave so much time and attention to. And that's very demoralizing. And it also, as you've noticed, it doesn't erase completely because once you've made some dark lines, they don't come off. Okay, so it's time to zoom out a little, which for you would mean like just taking a step back, seeing how you're doing with the overall effect. And we're not going to do a lot of details on the hair today. The most important thing with hair is shadow mapping. So this part's all darker here, and then there's some dark accents near the hairline, like this, and some dark behind the forehead here. A little more detail on the bow tie. And Elon, if you are watching, I'm going to hang on to this signed drawing, and I will happily sell it to you for $10,000, which to you would be like price of a stick of gum would be to me. So if you like this drawing, which I doubt, please reach out to me. My contact info is at my YouTube channel, and I'd be happy to sell you this beautiful portrait. That would be a heartwarming news story, wouldn't it? Elon Musk buys portrait from high school art teacher because he saw the video on YouTube. I think that might get my subscriber base over 1,000. Hey, I'm selling myself here. Okay, so Elon, I'm going to sign this just so you know it's authentic. And that is yours if you want it. I'm going to say goodbye to the viewers at home now. I'll see you next time.